government is meddling in an area where they should just leave things alone.
When you're young, if you want to move out, great, good adventure. But at some point, you got to try.
Nah, don't move out. Like,
No, I don't think you should either, yeah.
Like, why? She's wasted 20 grand a year just to live by herself. Big deal.
Do you get the scam text message at 1 a.m. every morning from like Toll or whatever?
Oh, yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Mate, everybody gets it, eh? It's ridiculous.
So what do you get on WhatsApp? Like Asian women wanting to come to Australia?
Yeah. Someone will message me, and they'll always
On WhatsApp.
Yeah. So they'll say, "Hey, is this
I've
this
had some
Jonathan?"
Numbers.
And I'm like, like I know it's a scam. I'm like, yeah, it is. It's like, oh yes, I got your details from a friend of mine. I'm blah blah. But it's always got a profile photo of like a really attractive female.
That's how they get you.
The one from Joseph Menwansa the other day. Dear Chris, I trust this finds you well and in good spirits. Did you know that? Oh, this is pretty bad actually.
There's the ones like, hey.
Wait, is that a legitimate one or is that?
No, I seem a bit heartless when I'm responding to it. That's fine.
There's the ones, hey Dad, it's John.
Oh yeah.
I changed my number.
Yes.
I
I should have
really
read
need
this
you.
one.
Oh.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, John, how are you?
Scams out that way.
John, how's the sex
Yes.
change going? Because I don't have a I don't have a son named John. You have people responding. It's all over TikTok.
Oh,
Oh man.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
scam to scammer. That's it.
You got
A
to.
good
There's a
one.
lot of people having fun scamming the scammers.
Yeah.
Oh, it
seen those?
is. Yeah. Like when they hack it.
Like it?
Yeah,
Have you guys seen
They
that?
got the video and they can
so
actually
good.
see
That's
the call
amazing,
center.
man.
Oh,
Then they need to do more of that. Or like the scammers getting really frustrated because they're pretending to be old lady and
Yeah.
redeeming the Google Play
Yeah.
cards, like the
No,
gift
don't
cards.
do that.
Yeah, just stop it! What are you doing? I said don't.
I take this scamming job seriously. Okay. I feel sorry for the scammers now.
come.
Do you reckon they got KPI?
They must have KPIs.
Oh,
surely.
for sure, man.
My
They work in
goodness.
sweatshop conditions.
Even
man.
Facebook groups, like when you're selling something on Facebook Marketplace, and it's like can you just send your details here?
Oh,
blah,
yeah,
blah, blah,
yeah,
blah. And it's
yeah.
like,
Dangerous,
it's not going
man.
to happen. No, what is it? I can't pick it up, but
Oh,
my
yes.
nephew
Yes.
will pick it up
Yes.
from
Oh, this is a Facebook Marketplace stuff.
Yeah. Man, they do that to cars a lot.
cars.
Like
Yeah.
when you're selling cars on
Do you reckon it happens
Marketplace.
much on Airbnb?
Maybe it does.
good segue.
Mr. Segway.
I'm back.
This is what we've been missing the last 2 episodes, segues. We've just been all over the shop.
Yeah,
No
man.
segues.
Like, no
we don't know where
direction.
to go, what to
I
talk
was
about.
listening to
Yeah.
the last episode. I'm glad you finally got Paige to sort out the tick because you're hopeless.
Well, PJ's doing it again. I'm not touching
Great.
it. I'm not touching it.
Finally.
PJ's video.
It's shocking.
It's all good. It's all good, man. But
Sick.
I like how we replaced you with Tom last week. Just someone not quite up to standard, so that we want you back
Oh.
next week.
Oh,
Poor Tom.
someone's great.
He won't listen to
He
this.
doesn't listen
He doesn't
anyway.
listen.
Oh.
He goes, I listened last week. I
You will
listened to my
see.
first
He will
episode.
see.
Of course he did. And he skipped all of us. Of just listening to
He
himself.
just fast forwarded to when Tom's speaking.
And the sexiest voice, Jason He.
Thank you very much.
Listens to the sexiest voice as well.
I'm back.
In fact, he said his wife listened to the show and she said you have a very sexy voice.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
right. Okay.
Lauren, if you're listening again,
Oh, that's
Hey, Lauren.
nice.
hey Lauren.
I still can't get Austin to listen to the show.
Of course, does Austin listen?
No, I tried at the beginning, but now I've given up.
Hey, Austin.
Do any of our partners listen to this show?
No, they're super
B
supportive.
tries.
She tries.
Okay.
She tries.
She's probably really
It must
busy.
be really
Like,
difficult.
yes.
She's like,
It's a hard-
I can't get through this.
My wife tells me that she hasn't been listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aw.
Yeah. She's like, I haven't been listening to the show. I'm like,
I value
"That's
the
okay.
honesty,
That's okay.
So welcome back. Let's get Austin to listen as well.
Yes, that's right.
We know Scarlett, your daughter, listens.
Yeah, exactly.
watches.
Yeah, that was an easy.
Well, then let's just talk shit about him and see if they listen. That's very simple.
Yeah,
That's
what,
right.
what dirt do we have on Austin?
I feel there's a bit
There's some
there.
dirt. We should do like a psychology.
We need an episode for that. No, I'm kidding.
episode.
This is your life.
No, I love you, babe.
But Chris, welcome back, mate.
Thanks,
Good to
man.
have
It's good to
Hollywood
be back.
Chris
Trying to
Ferris.
fix me poll, but it's
You-
good to be back.
Some of the
Oh,
things
get your
you
mind
say-
out of the gutter, everyone. It's me.
I feel like you say that every episode.
Just,
Every episode that you're here.
I'm just making sure it's swinging good.
But of course, the swinger. Welcome back
Swinging poll.
to Property Now.
Property
The
now today.
The Property Today, Property Later. The podcast inspired by property conversation and trying to inspire your property conversations around Australia. We've had some great feedback on the last few episodes, and we'll go through that in some detail, maybe in future episodes, because we're starting to get some great questions, especially on YouTube. I'm, of course, Michael Carboni. My friends call me Carbs. Welcome back, everybody. And big topic today, which is, does Airbnb hurt renters? So that was the segue earlier. Well done,
Oh,
Hollywood.
was it?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a segue earlier. But first, guys, how do we start? We had a full prop talk episode last week. I don't know how well it went. It was a bit messy. So I don't know if we'll
What's the
ever...
feedback? Did we get any
give us some
feedback? There was no feedback.
What kind of show is this? Have you really ran out of that much
Let's
content?
just pull back the curtain a little bit. As soon as we finished recording, I was like, guys, that was a piece of shit episode. But go back and listen to the train wreck that was our full prop talk episode. Let us know what you think. But we're going to start with a prop talk.
I'm glad I wasn't on that.
We're going to start with a prop talk. That's why we asked you back. We're like, Chris, please come back. Please come back. Let's prop talk. This one is related to an episode we had a few weeks ago, which was about the hotel of mum and dad. So let's get that prop top up. Hit it, Peach. Let's see if he has as much trouble.
That wasn't as smooth, eh?
Let's see if he has as much trouble as I do. I was going to say getting it up. Get your mind out of the gutter, Chris.
Mate, my mind is never in the gutter. I'm
Classy
a
guy.
road driver. No gutter.
Oh, dear.
Oh, give it back to
I just gave you huge
Give
raps.
it back to Prop talk.
I am nearly 27 years old, and today I am moving back in with my parents. This is not the plan I had for 27-year-old me.
Nope.
But that is just how bad the rental crisis is at the moment. I've been living on my own for the last 3 years. When I first started living on my own, I was paying $280 a week in rent. It was actually kind of fine to pay rent on my own, and I've never had like an outstanding salary. The reason why I'm moving back in with my parents is because my landlord wanted to increase my rent now to $450 a week.
Dang.
I wonder if that's from 200 to 400.
Wow.
Or if there was a
280.
minor jumps in between.
In an old building. It's nothing flash. Sure, I live in a good suburb. I live in Malvern. I'm probably just paying for location, but I have to pay to do my laundry. There's cracks in the walls. Like, it's nothing flashy. Like, it's not worth $450 a week. That's like $2,000 a month. What are people supposed to do? I'm
Move
so
back home.
lucky and I'm so grateful that I can move back in with my parents, but not everyone can do that. So what's your alternative? Like, you're homeless? The thing that really grinds my gears is that I am 99% sure that my landlord does not have a mortgage on this place, so that can't even be an excuse for landlords.
How
does she know that?
99% sure.
1980, and I know for a fact she has 2 investment properties. So she's just making money off what she can from the market.
stalking
And I
the
said, I was like,
investor,
there is no
yeah.
way I can afford this. And I have been an outstanding tenant, like outstanding. Rent's never been late. My inspections are always absolutely spotless. I've never caused any issues. And this is why my generation can't get ahead, why we can't buy houses. Like, I've been paying 20 grand a year in rent. But if I went to go get a house loan, they wouldn't see that as, oh, she can pay 20 grand a year.
That's a good
No,
point.
I have no
point.
savings because of how much I've been paying in rent and bills. That's why my parents were like, move home, you know, save that money and try and get ahead. Like, I'm so grateful. I love my family, and I don't have any issues moving back home with them. I do have an issue with the fact that they live over the other side of Geelong, and I'm still going to be traveling to Melbourne for work. So that's going to be so much fun. But what do people do?
What do people do? Should she cut out on those coffees? Or
Yeah,
what
exactly.
is,
Oh my
what is
goodness,
the-
I was
don't
thinking
know.
that.
The Starbucks thing
That's
is
a-
bigger than her head.
Man, that's massive.
Maybe she's
cut.
being sponsored.
Yeah. Man, that's $7.80 minimum.
Yeah.
Is it
If you're
780?
having
Yeah.
those every...
Man, that size is like.
Yeah.
Is,
Okay,
yeah.
that's
It's not going to solve the
impact
$400
freaking-
a week, $450 a week, though.
Oh.
I mean, unless she's drinking 10 coffees
No,
a day.
but all the little bits do help.
They do?
Yeah,
Yes.
man. 100%.
Yeah. I've
definitely
stopped
helps.
buying coffees
I think, like,
to
you got-
save money.
But, like, look, she's bitten the bullet. She's making a sacrifice moving back home. You got to make sacrifices. Like, when you're young, if you want to move out, great, good adventure. But at some point, you got to try
Nah.
and...
Don't move out. Like,
No, I don't think you should either, yeah.
Like, why? She's wasted 20 grand a year just to live by herself. Big deal.
And she's
Stay
got to
home.
pay to do her laundry, and there's cracks
Like,
in
she
the
says,
wall.
oh,
and-
thank
Yeah.
God my parents like they're happy to take me home. And then why'd you leave in the first place? Like, just stay home.
Because even with the old rent of, say, $300 a week or $280, you know, that's still 15 grand a year.
You just
Yeah.
like,
So,
but
Yeah.
like you're complaining. You're attacking the landlord. They've owned their own property and they've decided to rent it out so you can have a place to live. You can't you shouldn't be attacking the landlord in that scenario. Like, go down and attack Woolies where your cost of groceries have gone up and all your bills have probably gone up. But like, you could have just stayed home for that period. And if your parents were happy to take you back now, I'm sure they would have been happy to keep you there. And you could have saved 2 or 3 years, that 15, 20 grand, and had a deposit and then be sort of control your own destiny and buy a property. Like, I mean,
The traveling is
Yeah.
the thing that gets
Yeah.
me, right? Because like sometimes you got to make a sacrifice. So like you got to like everyone. I believe everyone has a right to a home,
Yeah.
but not everyone has a right to live wherever they want, right? So yeah, living in inner Melbourne comes with a cost. Living in inner Sydney comes with a cost. Living in any living
But
in
I-
a capital city
I think she's
comes with a cost.
Yeah, but she's like a representation of what a lot of people are going through. Like if she was a first responder, for example,
Yep.
and this you hear quite
Yep.
often, like minimum wages, have to live super far away because the prices have gone up. Like, do we need to make a case for someone if their personal circumstances, or what they are, and they need to live in a certain spot to be able to work?
but like she's moving back home and she can travel. So
She can,
it's
yeah,
more,
in
it's
her
more the
situation,
convenience
yes.
factor that she wanted.
Yeah.
Probably wanted to live alone, wanted to do that whole
Yeah.
lifestyle. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
But then when you've made those decisions and then in 3 or 4 years' time later, you want to complain about the impact of your own decisions, I don't
I
have
think
sympathy
if-
for you. Like, I think
if-
you've got to figure it out yourself. And like, if you can potentially stay at home and save that 50, like she could have already saved 45 grand for the last.
True, but I don't
3 or
think
4
she's
years.
complaining about the fact that she can't buy a house. I mean, she is saying that now because it's gone up so much, but she would have been able to maybe save for a deposit as well as live independently.
She may be
But
happy to rent
she's
for a while.
complaining like
Yeah.
that the landlord doesn't have a mortgage and all that kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah.
go buy your own property then. And,
Yeah.
and to do so, you
Yeah.
could have
Fair
saved
enough.
up a deposit
Yeah.
and go and bought your own property and then not be controlled by a landlord.
I don't buy into this. Oh yeah, you worked hard for your investments. That's not fair because I don't have it. I hate when people start
No.
talking like that. So I don't
No.
like that. But I get what you're saying, right? She might have been happy to rent
Yeah.
and stay, but
Yeah.
it's just gotten out of reach.
That's
for her.
right. Yeah.
End of the day, though, if you can't afford to live there, then you can't afford to live there. So you
No,
got
I
to
just
look
think
at
it's
other
crazy
options.
That's right.
that over a certain period of time that you were initially able to afford it on a salary and then 5 years later you're not able to afford it anymore. Your salary would have gone up. Like I don't know, it's crazy to be outpriced that much that you can't live.
Look, it's a big jump. The rent is
Yeah.
a big,
It's a
like
big
from
jump.
280.
It's a big jump.
And I don't know if
yeah.
280 was fair market price anyway to begin
Yeah,
with. But
for
from
one
280
bedroom.
to 450, it's a huge jump. So she's angry at the jump in rents. But I just think like if you had have taken a bit more of a longer term approach rather than just wanting to live away from mum and dad and take a bit of a long term approach with your thinking. Like,
Yeah, but,
but save up, like-
well.
yeah, but traveling is part of life. Like it is what it is. Like if you've,
Geelong
not
is like
happy-
an hour and a
Yeah,
half.
it is long.
out
It's
of-
like Wollongong to
it's not.
Sydney.
It's not a short distance.
but like, is that the only job that you can do?
But think
Same
about it, big
location.
jump. So 3-4 years ago it was 280, now it's 450. Did she not have a rental increase in that time? Was that because of COVID? Was that because of other
Exactly,
reasons? Because it
yeah.
probably should have went up during that
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And we're just seeing like a bit of a...
Exactly. Yeah.
So maybe she had it a little bit easier than it should have been for a little period of time. Maybe it shouldn't have been 280 recently. I don't know, but she
Yeah.
doesn't actually mention if it has gone up. She just says at the start it was this, now it's this,
Yeah.
maybe for effect. But very interesting. And look, there's a
Yeah.
lot of 27-year-olds probably in the same boat.
For
It is
sure.
very hard. Sav, you sent me a potential prop talk today, which was about how 30-year-olds, it's impossible for them to get ahead. And 30-year-olds today, different to 30-year-olds.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
You see,
years ago.
exactly.
I think people have just taken like a short term approach to some of the thinking though. Like, is the plan just to rent forever?
Yeah.
And if the plan is to rent forever, then you're going to be impacted by situations like this.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to be impacted by rising rents, I mean, you're going to be impacted if you buy a property from more increase in interest rates.
Yeah.
But if you still want to have a bit more control over your destiny, like getting kicked out of properties
Yeah.
and rental increases, then you got to buy.
Yeah.
That's just, and to do that, maybe you need to sacrifice a little bit for a few years to save a deposit, which could have been the rent, and live with mum and dad if you've got the ability to do that, and then actually get in.
I agree. This could be the best thing for her. Go home,
Yeah.
home cook
I think
meals,
I'd
do
love
the
to follow up
washing,
with her
save,
like
yeah.
with Gemma in 2 or 3 years and
Yeah.
see she's lived with mum and dad.
Yeah.
She's probably been able to save 15, 20 grand a year. She's got that 10-20% deposit because it's Melbourne, and then she can buy
And I
a
don't
bit
get
more
it.
freedom.
I also don't get it, man. An hour commute, mate. Throw on a good podcast. Listen to us.
I
talk.
used to
Probably-
travel an hour and 20 minutes for
Same.
like 4 years each
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I did door to
Like, that's
door.
just-
3
Yeah.
hours.
Maybe it just happened. She's fuming. I can understand that. She's just letting out what she's
Find the
thinking
silver
in her-
lining, Jenna.
Yeah.
Find the silver
yeah.
lining.
Maybe she's calmed down a bit
I can't
now.
talk anymore. It takes me 14 minutes to get to work, but I have done the commute. And I know PJ listening over there doing a good job.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
2 hours each way, Peach?
What?
Hour and a
Oh
half.
my goodness.
Depends
yeah.
on the traffic. Guys, let's talk about something that may be impacting the rental crisis at the moment is Airbnb. Is Airbnb hurting renters? So we're going to dive into, recently we saw new Airbnb regulations in Brisbane and what impact that might have on the short-term rental market. The mayor of Brisbane announced requirements for property owners to get permits, planning approvals, and 24/7 management for Airbnb operations. We're going to look into that, what the broader implications may be. Chris is like...
Government
I know, yeah.
just fucking piss me off.
You got to run. I'll tell you got to run for government.
Yeah.
Let's try... We're going to watch a video from the ABC to give us the full details. So let's jump on that page. Edit.
And I'm hoping we got some stats here. I like some stats.
I think Sav
I
comes
See a
with the
sheet of
stats.
paper there, Sav?
Sav comes with the stats.
I've got my stats.
You're the stat girl.
I'm a stat.
Glasses now as well.
Airbnbs are going to start dropping off in Brisbane as the council begins to pull the plug on them.
We've identified over 400 properties that need to come back into the long-term rental market.
Have you told those owners yet?
We'll be going through that process.
New rules are being
They're gonna
rolled
love
out
it, the
in Brisbane
owners, aren't
that
they?
force landlords to get council approval before turning their place into an Airbnb. Previously, the council bumped up rates for short-term stays by 50%, but apparently that didn't do much, so permits are the next step, plus the council will be upping rates by a further 10%. The new local laws will require body corporates to give the tick of approval, so if you want to list your unit but your neighbours aren't keen, then you're out of luck. Following those initial rate hikes, Airbnb said short-term stays can't be blamed for the housing crisis and that they bring in huge tourism dollars for local areas. Currently, less than 1% of properties in Brisbane are being used as short-term accommodation.
I think a lot of people have just decided they'll pay the extra rates and keep doing it. So that's 400 houses that can then be available for long-term rent.
So 400
Wow.
houses.
1%.
Kind of a small...
Yeah.
It's one...
1%.
Look, it's...
Storm in a teacup.
It may be having a little effect, but it's probably one of many
Yeah.
Exactly.
things
But that
need to-
argument with, bringing tourists and helping the local economy, shops, businesses,
that not
increasing
worth
spending, yeah, that's a major impact as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Exactly. It's just such, I don't know, narrow thinking.
yeah, but it just shows action, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what the result is going to be,
Yeah.
but at least, from a visibility level,
You're so right.
we're doing something
Yeah,
about
from
it,
a
man.
political perspective,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like we're only hurting 400 people,
Yeah.
so that's not going to
It's-
affect the
it's
vote
honestly,
too
it's
much.
just politics.
And it
Yeah.
looks like
It
we're
is.
making
Yeah, yeah.
we're making a big difference.
Yeah, because you get to do interviews, you get to talk about what you're doing, about the housing crisis. Yeah, we've put 400
It's
properties on the
shocking.
market for rent.
It's
Yeah.
just another area where government is meddling in free markets. I'm a big believer of free markets, where government is meddling in an area where they should just leave things alone. At the end of the day, if there's 400 properties available on Airbnb, there's a demand for it. At some point in time, if that becomes 400, 800, 2,000 properties, the market will naturally correct itself. They just won't fill up. And then when a landlord sees that their property on Airbnb is not filling up for 1, 2, 3 months, they're going to say, shit, you know what? I'll take it off Airbnb because it's not working, and they'll make it a long-term rental. You need to let the market dynamics play itself out rather than trying to meddle in and they're consistently making things worse.
Yeah.
From local, state, sometimes federal, they're making things worse from a housing supply and rental affordability.
It's not actually
point of
going to
view.
help.
It's not going to help.
Like, it's not going to help.
And it's the areas that the Airbnbs are popular in. Like I would say, place like Byron Bay might have like 25% Airbnbs because that's a
Exactly.
holiday destination where
right,
people
yes.
and they're going to fill those all year
Yeah,
round.
yeah.
But you're not going to have Airbnbs in like Leppington.
No.
You know what I mean? So
No.
like it.
Yeah, my point is, if you want to have, if a landlord wants to put an Airbnb in Leppington, go do it.
Yeah, go for it. See how
right,
that
because
goes.
you'll realize that it won't work, and then you'll put it
It's a
back to the
business,
long term
right?
market.
Yeah.
So to me, it's not like you're trying to control the supply of stock. You're just trying to control the narrative, and like you should let the market determine what stock they want there.
Yeah.
If there's a high demand for Airbnbs, then there's a high demand, and so be it.
I agree with
That
this.
supports the local businesses that might be happening there. And like, what happens if you take all the Airbnb stock out of the market? No one's going to come there and stay from a short-term perspective and spend money in that local economy.
Yeah, agreed. What makes Airbnb such an attractive investment? Because they've put up rates 50%, and they're still doing it. They're still Airbnbers, and I've seen some people on TikTok and Instagram who own like 23, 31 Airbnbs.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
it's like that is definitely an investment strategy for these people.
Yeah.
Like what makes it so alluring?
But
to
it
these
seems like
investors?
a lot of those on TikTok, they don't actually own the property. They just go lease the property. They get permission to be able to sublease it for Airbnb purposes. So
Really?
they don't actually own 23 properties. So so a lot of them are US based. And I do see it a lot talking about, because they're teaching the strategy, right? So they're selling this strategy in courses and so forth. They'll have 50 properties that they've signed contracts to lease the properties. They'll then furnish the properties. Then they'll sublease it through Airbnb, and they make the margins. So it's quite smart because there's no not much capital outlay. You'd have to own the properties. You'd have to buy them. You're just using Airbnb to generate cash flow.
It's interesting too. If you look at a place like Byron Bay, the Airbnb income you would make in summer might be the same as like what you'd get for rent the whole year round, potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably...
Well, the premise is always the
holiday
higher
location.
cash flow, right? So you've got Airbnbs and apartments in Olympic Park because it's very popular for people going to concerts and shows and this and that.
Yeah.
Where investors will buy an apartment, that's a 2-bedroom apartment, and then rent it out through Airbnbs. All the Airbnb management companies are really proactive in trying to convince the landlord to change from long-term rentals to short-term rentals because they're showing them, like you're saying, that there's an economic demand for it, saying to them, like, hey, we've got people wanting to book your apartment and they're paying $700 a night.
Yeah, so like one night would equal like a whole week's worth.
Correct.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
so if you do this, yes, you'll have a 50% vacancy rate, but at the end of the day, you're probably got to be making double the amount of rental income versus a long-term rental.
I think a lot of the Airbnb market would also be second homes for some people. So like you might say, hey, look, this is a holiday home or our city home if it's in Brisbane, like in these examples here.
Yeah.
When we're not using it, we'll short-term lease it.
Yeah,
we'll
absolutely.
Airbnb it.
Yeah.
But we also want to use it because we have family there and we
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. There might be there might
Yes,
be a
there's
whole
a strategy
number of
because if you
reasons.
lease it out for a 12-month period,
Yeah.
you can never go there because
Yeah.
someone's
Yeah.
got it for 12 months. If it's short-term, then you can, like as a homeowner, you can book it out yourself
Yep.
and then you block it out for those periods from a short-term lease perspective.
Yeah.
But like, so they said that there was 400 Airbnbs in that local area out of how many rental properties in that whole area?
Do you have any stats, stat lady?
Well, actually, I mean, what they said, because Airbnb did a report on this, because this is not new. Like I think the government is really trying to tackle Airbnb, and they're bringing more regulations gradually, it seems. So this report came out last November. So what they've said is that actually short-term rentals are typically 1 to 2% of the overall housing stock in each state. So what Brisbane, the 1% seems to be general across Australia where Airbnb operates. So 1 to 2% of the overall housing stock.
Which doesn't sound like a lot, but actually, if you got vacancy rates at under 1%, if there was an additional 1% of stock, then it can be substantial. But I'd really like to dig in to sort of see some of the stats, and I'd like to see on the opposite side if there's anyone out there that has had an Airbnb strategy and then maybe move some properties back to long-term rental. Is there anyone out there from a listener point of view that's moved some of their properties back to long-term because the Airbnb strategy didn't work? Like, to me, I feel like it's market dynamics and let it supply and demand sort of play out.
Yeah.
I'd love to sort of hear from anyone if they've actually reversed their strategy, gone from Airbnb strategy to a long-term tenancy back to long-term tenancy.
It feels risky to me. Like there's more to gain, but like you wouldn't, unless you're doing it the way you mentioned, Jace, with the subleasing sort of Airbnb.
That's still got a bit of
that's very interesting, but I guess it seems like a more sophisticated and risky strategy. Given maybe you can, it's best in summer, so like it's empty for periods of time during the year. So
I think it depends on the location.
Yeah,
like Sydney, Brisbane, like people are traveling there all year round, but there might be some beach towns where it's where people don't rent as much, like Port Stephens. I mean that, yeah. That's a big example. Yeah.
Country.
Yes.
Jace, do you think I love having you here for these sorts of questions? Would lenders look at an Airbnb investment differently?
Yeah, they do. So they look at it two ways, mainly on how they use the income generated from the Airbnb as part of your borrowing capacity calculation. So one way is that they'll take the actual total income you've earned. So let's say you've got an apartment, 2-bedroom, long-term rental, you're only going to get $35,000 a year. But short-term rental, you're getting $70,000 a year. Some banks will take that $70,000 a year into consideration, but they will apply like a max return on the amount of rental they'll use. So usually it's about 6 to 7%. So even if you're generating $70,000, they'll cap it at using no more than 6% rental yield of the value of the property. So if the property is $1 million, 6% is $60,000. Even though you've got paperwork in your tax return showing you're earning every single year $70,000-$80,000, they're still only going to use $60,000. Now, another way they do it, some banks that are more conservative, they won't factor in the short-term rental income. They only look at the rental income on a long-term basis on the market rent. All right? So if that property it has been renting out again for $70,000 every year, But long-term market rent is only 35 grand a year. Doesn't matter what you're using it for. The bank is going to take 35 grand a year as rental income for that property.
And is that because of risk factor? Like,
Yeah, correct. So that's why it's important to, when you're speaking to a mortgage broker based on your situation, because if you walk into a bank that is going to take the lower value or be more conservative when it comes to Airbnb rental, that can make a difference of borrowing capacity of several $100,000 if you go into a bank that is more pro Airbnb and happy to use the higher rental amount, even with that 6% or 7% cap on the yield. Yeah.
What about like the jobs Airbnb creates? Like if there's a long-term rental in place, there's no, that doesn't create jobs. What about like, because obviously if someone stays there,
there's
they
cleaning
need to be
services,
cleaning
there's a whole bunch of
services,
things,
agency management services, that like it creates jobs. And then there's obviously the people that are coming to the Airbnb to stay. They're obviously going to spend money in the local community, like probably more than someone that's there for long term. Like they're not going to cook, right? Like if you're there for 1 or 2 nights, you're probably not going to cook.
Yeah.
So you're going to be going out, spending money in the local restaurants, and
which a
cafes.
long-term person might not be
May not.
eating out every night.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, hopefully not,
Yeah.
because it's very expensive.
That's right.
But you're right, I think, and especially again in these holiday towns, you've got. I mean, I've known agents in holiday towns or like beach suburbs where they're like this short stay leasing
Has built their business.
is bigger than their long-term leasing from a business perspective.
Some of their businesses are called somewhere short
Short
term,
stay, yeah.
leasing, right? Holiday homes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all they do.
Yeah. And I think the important thing to remember is that they're doing this to tackle the housing affordability crisis. Is that actually the best strategy? Because that's why I can't really...
I don't think it's the best strategy.
No.
It may be a
strategy.
part of a bigger picture,
Yeah.
but it's not
I'd
going
like
to
to
solve...
see the bigger
I think they're
picture.
just playing like the
Problems.
political
Yeah.
optics game. Right?
Exactly.
Like,
For
And
sure.
that's why
hey,
I just
we're
don't
in
think...
politics and we're trying to help the housing supply
Yeah.
crisis.
It's
and the rental
interesting though,
crisis.
because this is not like in Australia. This is a fairly new conversation, but in other countries, these conversations have been happening as well. So there's like places like New York, San Francisco, Amsterdam as well, Hong Kong, like where they actually have been implementing strategies to limit Airbnbs because it is impacting the.
Do you have any examples? Or do you have
Yes,
any, like,
I
life?
do.
Is this
Here's one I prepared earlier.
Is this a you example? Is this something that happened to you?
No, so actually, my personal example is that I was renting, and whenever I would go overseas, I subleased on Airbnb.
Excellent.
No
So,
way.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I
that's great
did.
strategy.
Yeah,
It
but
pays
luckily
for
I
your
don't
holiday.
live there anymore
Does it
because
pay
it
for your
wasn't
holiday?
allowed. Yeah, it did. Well, it covered the rent. You
It's
know,
not
it
allowed.
was good. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I rate Airbnb. I think it's a great.
So you're an Airbnb investor.
Yeah,
technically.
kind of.
Have
Yeah,
been.
yeah.
That's
yeah,
great.
Yeah.
Tell us about overseas. Like, what's
Yeah, so in let's see, in Hong Kong, they were doing some research there, and they found that the arrival of Airbnb would drive up housing rates by about 4%. Airbnb activities would increase the rent to income ratio by about 4.5%. And short-term home sharing provided by Airbnb under circumstance would lead to the housing unaffordability in Hong Kong. So this was one of the studies that has been done in Hong Kong and then in Amsterdam as well. So they implemented regulations there. So, which actually impacted Airbnb lost 90 or 80% of its addresses in Amsterdam following introduction of new rules requiring owners to register with the city. Landlords are limited to 30 rental days a year.
So they lost 80% of the addresses available.
That's right.
All right, and is the housing rental crisis better in Amsterdam?
Well, look, it's something that was implemented in 2021. I suppose they're still kind of seeing if it's having an effect, but it's just interesting that the government is also stepping in there to limit.
so it's happening around the world.
It is definitely.
Not just
But then when they put these
Yeah.
limits in place, does it actually help?
that the research still has to show that.
Yeah.
I will follow up.
We don't know.
Yeah,
Interesting too. In Brisbane in particular, they're talking about needing approval from say if it's an apartment complex, for example, from the rest of the strata.
That's just mean, isn't it?
If you're an owner
mean,
occupier,
Yeah.
you don't like because what some Airbnbs, you think about bucks parties and kids messing up the place. If you're an owner occupier, you're probably going to say no to
Yeah,
that,
but in
wouldn't
fairness,
you?
in fairness to that point, you can have a long-term tenant that messes up the place.
Exactly.
As well. Like,
Absolutely. Probably
I get
harder
it,
to
and
get
like
out.
it's probably more prone on Airbnb because it's short-term stay. Someone might come in and trap, but like
But you forget that you can rate each other on Airbnb. So the host rates the person that comes, and then the person that comes rates the host. So it's
Spoken like a true Airbnb investor.
Yeah.
what's your rating, Sat?
Super host.
What do you think, Jace?
Yeah.
Look, I reckon it's that perception, it's that bias that people think that people who rent Airbnbs, it's high risk, they'll trash the place, they don't respect the property as much as someone who's living there on a long-term basis. In my opinion is that, if I'm a owner, there's nothing in it for me to say yes to you or approve for you to rent out your property for Airbnb. Right? Like there's no real incentive. I might not necessarily be against it, but I might just be leaning on the safer side and I'll say no. Right? Because I don't see any particular motivation for me as a owner of the body corporate to say yes and I approve your request to rent out the property for Airbnb.
Well, that's what it's designed for. They know that the rest
Right.
of the
Yeah, they know
owner-
they're gonna
Exactly.
say
Yeah.
no.
They know
Like,
the rest
I
of the
reckon
owner.
most people would say no, even if they are indifferent about the issue.
Yeah.
Because
I
just 'cause
might
they
as well
There's a
just
risk.
say no.
I think they're playing on that.
Yeah,
They know that
correct.
people will
Yeah,
say
I
no.
would say no,
Yeah.
even
Sure.
if I'm not.
Yeah.
I've never been impacted. I've never had a personal experience. I heard from anyone that I know had a bad experience with, and I would go use Airbnb to rent for my holidays, but I'll still probably say no to the neighbor saying, "Can we do Airbnb on the property?"
Maybe it's because of all
Yeah.
those properties that you've trashed in Airbnb Jace, on your holidays.
It's all coming out now.
It's all coming out, Jace.
You have to use your other identity.
Yeah. I've had to use a lot of different emails to register, but now you got to verify your mobile number. Damn.
Just get a new mobile
Get a
number.
new burner number.
Yeah, but that's my opinion. And I think you're right that they're taking advantage and they know that's going to be the outcome, and then putting in that requirement so that they can let the community
So
regulate
it
it.
sounds like we're all pretty against this change, right?
We're all
Like,
very.
I don't know if it's going to impact the rental crisis, how they're thinking, but I mean, it'd be interesting to see. Like, they're going to try and impact it, but
I didn't expect us to all be so against the change. So it's good that we have a video, and this is actually a good segue, but video from someone that I respect very much when it comes to this sort of stuff, Chris Kohler.
he's a legend.
He's,
I love his
he's a legend,
content. The best,
and
man.
he speaks to the impact that Airbnb is having on long-term rentals.
All right.
Just a little disclaimer: if you're listening, there's a few visuals here. We'll explain it at the end, but let's go over to Chris Kohler because I love this bloke. Let's go.
Is Airbnb ruining the rental market? Yeah, pretty much. Have a look at this graphic. It shows the number of short-term rental places available in Australia right now versus the number of long-term rental places available right now in Australia. So that means that the purple bars are the places that you can live permanently, and the pink bars are the number of places where you can have a short holiday. That's a big issue. The national rental vacancy rate right now is 1%. That means that the costs are going to keep on rising and the number of options for renters are going to keep on falling. And you can understand why property investors are doing this. It's not like they're the enemy here. I mean, they just want the ability to charge higher fees at peak times, and they don't want to have to commit to long-term contracts with just one set of tenants. It makes sense. But that means that there's a lot of pressure right now on politicians to figure this problem out and create a much better balance in the rental market, because the situation is getting worse every single day.
It's a huge boiling point, right? And for anyone that was listening and not watching, there was a graph shown.
If we bring the graph up, like Paige will bring it up, but there's one thing that I don't think that graph factors in.
Yep.
And it's immigration.
Yep.
That's sucking up the rental, the long-term rental supply. So immigrants coming into the country sucks up the rental supply, and because we're not building enough, we're not replenishing new stock to be able to. So the short-term rentals, yes, it's increased, but I think what he's trying to show on that graph is there's been an increase in short-term rentals, which has directly resulted in the availability of long-term rentals, which is actually not the graph. You need to also take into account population growth and immigration that's come in that's sucked up the long-term rental stock in the market. And because we're not building enough new housing supply, the replenishment of that long-term stock available for rent is what's directly reflected in that purple graph.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And to the point, you can't blame investors for wanting, more
he says that,
flexibility
yeah.
or more. And he actually says it really well. But you're right, and it goes back to my original sort of point, which is this is maybe having an effect, especially in the greater boiling pot of what's going on. So under 1%, supply.
That's got to do with new housing supply. That graph has come down since we've not been able to complete as much new housing
Exactly.
supply. And then immigration
graph would
has
have
shot
gone down
up.
anyway.
So like I would love to have a
regardless of
third
the
bar
rentals
there,
going up.
or even like another 2 bars showing immigration that's come in over the years. Maybe we can challenge Chris to actually
Chris
do
Kohler, can you add some bars?
this. Put the immigration levels that have come in over the last few years as well, together with the housing completions. And I think you'll see housing completions have gone off a cliff, and you'll see immigration has peaked.
Or the Chris Kohler challenge, if he wants to add the bars, or if anyone else wants to add some bars. Maybe
we'll add the
Maybe
bars.
we'll add the bars. I just want to get some interaction. But yeah, you're probably right. So is it safe to say that it's having an effect overall, but it's not the reason that we've got problems? Sav,
Well,
you've got some stats.
okay, so this
How
is
good is
me advocating for Airbnb.
Hey.
If they want to sponsor the show. Yes, so what they actually said from the report that they did, which was, I think Urbis did the report, that said that there's no consistent relationship between the proportion of non-hosted short-term rentals in Australia and vacancy rate for long-term rentals. No strong relationship between the proportion of non-hosted short-term rentals and rental affordability. Only a weak relationship between the proportion of housing utilized as non-hosted short-term rentals and the proportion of households in rental stress. And then one more. Only a weak relationship between changes in the proportion of non-hosted short-term rentals and changes in real rents.
So, look on the other side. Is this Airbnb's?
Well, that's Airbnb.
No, so it's
Is it like a bit of salt bay
absolutely.
there? Or?
But I suppose they did an independent research, so they hired a research company.
Yeah.
But it's on the
So-
Airbnb website, right?
Yeah,
Shocking
the report,
that
you
they
can view the
and paid
report.
by Airbnb.
Yeah,
So look,
yeah.
I hear
there
it.
might be some bias in
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah.
that's what they
But I
came
think
to.
with any of these issues, I think we all agree that there's multiple issues: housing supply,
Yeah.
approvals, construction, immigration.
Like
all
when
of
did
that.
Airbnb start in
Yeah.
Australia?
I don't know.
Yeah, but if the well, I don't-
Maybe
we
10
might-
years ago, I don't know.
It would be a while. Hey?
Yeah,
Well,
but if
yeah.
you
So
look
wouldn't
at
it
any
have
of
impacted it straight away, or like a couple of years after they
Airbnb,
launched?
another.
Well,
research.
if the rate of
So that's a good point, right? So no one was talking about it when it first
Yeah.
launched because we weren't in the housing crisis
To me,
that we
the
are in today.
politicians are looking
Yeah.
for something to blame,
100%,
and it's
100%.
convenient.
If you
right.
have to look at these
Yeah.
issues in isolation, right? It's always an issue. But it's actually all of these multiple issues that
You're
you
right.
don't just go fix Airbnb or sort that out, and that's the solution to the housing crisis. That's just a very small portion of the solution.
if vacancy rates are 2.5%, 3%, Airbnb no problem. And
Yeah.
when vacancy rates are
Correct.
1%,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like, oh, Airbnb.
Well, that's why Airbnb
Yes.
was never a problem for housing crisis. It was always a problem for the environment and the well-being of other people. Like
Yeah.
talking about being messy or trashing the place, not respecting the property or whatever.
To
But
me,
now
this
it's
is
like
all-
a housing crisis.
It's all
right?
like post-COVID stuff,
Yeah.
and it's got to do with immigration levels coming in, high immigration levels sucking up the rental stock. We're not replenishing new rental stock from a housing supply point of view, and that's what's creating the short-term rentals, the increase in short-term rentals, and then the decrease in long-term rentals because we're not replenishing the long-term rental stock.
Yeah, because you can say the same thing about targeting landlords, right? So 10 years ago, not many people targeting landlords. Yeah, it's great that you're buying
Low-hanging
multiple
fruit to bash them.
investment properties. Good on you, right? Now it's like people don't want to say how many investment properties they have. So do you own it?
Unless they're buyers agents.
No
I have
comment.
77 investment properties in 5 years.
Buy my course.
Yeah. They're not worth anything,
Yes.
but there's 77 of them.
Exactly.
I can help you buy.
Yeah, exactly.
Buy my course.
I've retired. I'm financially independent.
Click
I'm
the
not
link below.
I'm not doing it for the money. It's just for the greater public good. Yeah,
Yes.
Good Samaritans out there.
yeah.
Is this unfair for existing Airbnb investors? This like suddenly
Yes.
changing it so dramatically?
Unfair. So like I'm all for free market. Is it unfair? No. I think when you buy a property, you've got to
You know
take
that
into account
things
there's
might
risks.
change, there's risks.
Things can change, new taxes, new laws. So that's if you want to be an investment, you've got to understand the levels of risk. Is it unfair? No, I don't think it's unfair. I think it is what it is. But do I agree with it? No. But is it unfair for the landlords? No. So like,
Yeah, because that's something you should consider when you're buying that investment property. You're not just banking on the fact that it's going to generate short-term rental income, because that's no different if you're buying a property in a mining town and the rent's $2,000 a week, when normally the rent's $700 a week. But when the mine's finished, it's like, oh, that was unfair for me.
Because on the
I'm
flip
being
side,
lauded.
on the flip side, if they can't rent out their properties in the short term market, are we going to sit here and say
Is
it's
that
unfair?
unfair?
No,
Well,
that's your choice.
It
So
goes.
it's your decision.
It goes back to the prop talk. Is it unfair that her rent went up? That's what happens when you're renting. It could happen.
It's like what I tell my kids. Life is unfair. Nothing's fair.
My kids think everything is unfair.
Yeah, I
You
know.
got more iPad
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
You just
Oh,
went
God.
to the park.
Yeah. That's right. It's unfair. She did get more iPad time. Just accept it.
Yeah,
Just move back home to your oh.
you're 12.
Exactly, until it starts affecting you. And
Buy
then
your
it's
own
unfair.
That's right.
You know what? Yeah, it's my iPad time.
Yeah, buy your iPad. While you're living at home, you should be able to buy your
I
iPad.
can tell this is a recurring thing for you, Jason. Eh?
I know, I opened up a wound.
That's dealing with girls.
iPads, right?
Guys, look, I like staying at hotels more anyway than Airbnbs.
I prefer Airbnbs.
I'm like
Do you?
room
Yes.
service.
I
And
don't think I've ever
Sure.
stayed in an Airbnb.
You never stayed? Do you? Does anyone own an Airbnb? Just off? Yeah, no.
No comment.
no.
No, I don't. I don't. But you can buy my course.
You seem to know a lot about it. Do you think?
Nice.
Do we think after hearing about this now potentially happening, like it could happen across Australia, right? Is Airbnb investing like a viable investment strategy in all of our opinions?
Look, it's still a viable strategy, but when you have stuff like this in the media, it'll straight away affect people's perception, right? Someone might have been looking at a property and it's a quality Airbnb short-term investment to balance out their other long-term investments, right? But now once they watch this, the uncertainty is going to kick in. They're going to be thinking, oh, you know what, that's probably not a good idea because I wonder what other regulation is going to come out after this just to target Airbnbs. Yeah, it's certainly going to affect that sector.
Couldn't agree more. Great opinions, guys, as always. If you have an opinion at home, then jump on YouTube. Let us know what you think. And if you're one of these investors with 47 Airbnbs,
I love it. It's getting
you're
more
one-
and
no,
more.
47. It must be 47. If you have less than 47, we don't want to hear from you. No, even one is fine. Thank you, Chris, for bringing me down to earth. That's amazing, guys.
Because I'd like to hear if anyone's flipped their strategy. They've had an Airbnb strategy and they've gone back to long-term investment strategy.
If you have, let us know. Come into our office and we'll have a chat about it.
We'll get you
as
on the
well.
show.
We'll get you on the show. I love it. Thanks, guys. Great chatting as always.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carbs.
The Property Now podcast offers opinions on Australian property news for informational and entertainment purposes only, and they are general in nature. It does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. It does not constitute professional advice. Always seek expert guidance before making any property-related decisions.